Spring 1987, Kursk region, Russia. It was a day off. People were out in a small wooded area picking spring flowers, just enjoying the day. Nothing unusual, until one of the men noticed a child's jacket lying under a bush. He bent down to get a closer look and then instantly jumped back. On the ground was the body of a small boy. In his hand, he was still holding a fresh bunch of snowdrops. Police arrived within minutes. But before they even had time to fully process what they were looking at, another report came in. There was a second body not far from the first one. Another little boy. Both children had been strangled. One of them looked about 5 years old, the other maybe 8. And that's where this story really takes a dark turn. Because this isn't just a murder case. It's a story about love, obsession, and hatred. And the victims were two small, completely innocent boys. Before we go on, there's something you should know. This case happened a long time ago, and from the period when the boys were still alive, almost no real photographs exist. So the images used in this video are reconstructions. And one quick favor, if you can, like the video and leave a comment. You're not liking it because of the crime. You're supporting the work that went into telling this story. Now let's go to Kurchatov. Kurchatov is a small town in the Kursk region, with a population of around 39,000 people. In a town this size, what happened wasn't just shocking, it was devastating. Less than 30 minutes after the bodies were found, senior police officials were already at the scene. First, everything looked pretty simple. The kids went into the woods to pick flowers and ran into a violent killer. The two boys looked very similar, so investigators assumed they were brothers. All they had to do now was figure out who they were. But there was a problem. No one had reported any missing children. So police started calling schools and kindergartens across the city. Eventually, one daycare reported that a 5-year-old boy hadn't shown up for 2 days. His name was Kolya Tolstik. When the teacher saw the photo of the body, she nearly collapsed. The child in the picture was Kolya. It also turned out he had an older brother, a first-grade student. Very quickly, it became clear that the second body was most likely his brother. Police began looking for the boy's mother, but before they could find her, she walked into the police station herself. She was pregnant with her third child. She said she believed the boys were spending the weekend with their father, which is why she hadn't worried or gone looking for them. That only changed when the kindergarten called her. But investigators soon confirmed the father hadn't seen the boys at all during that time. When the woman was told that her children had been found dead, she couldn't even respond. She collapsed and an ambulance had to be called. Investigators struggled just to speak to her, even briefly, and that left one question hanging in the air. How does something like this happen in a town this small? Detectives knew right away this wasn't going to be an easy case. A lot of workers in Kurchatov were only there temporarily, which meant the killer could have left town almost immediately. So investigators started close to home, with the people around the boy's mother. The first person they looked at was Elena herself. She'd been born and raised in this town. After finishing school, she got married very young, probably too young. The marriage fell apart fast. Her husband drank heavily and had a history of being violent toward her. At first, Elena believed having a child would fix things. Didn't. She had a second child, and somehow everything got even worse. Eventually, she got divorced, and that's when reality really hit her. Raising 2 boys on her own was exhausting. Over the years, the woman who had once been cheerful and kind slowly changed. She became short-tempered, sharp, easily irritated. One of her co-workers, a woman named Ludmila, later said, when she smiled, she was beautiful, but when she snapped, it felt like she turned into a completely different person. Her sharp tongue and bitterness became the first things people noticed about her. Still, deep down, she held on to a quiet hope that one day a prince on a white horse would come along and fix everything. Years passed. No prince ever showed up. A few years later, she married again. That relationship didn't last either and ended in divorce. Time went on, the boys grew older, and the only real comfort in Elena's life became her job. A place where she could escape the pressure at home and the constant fighting between the 2 kids. Elena worked as a secretary and typist. The job was repetitive, not especially hard, but it paid relatively well. That salary was all she had to support herself and her 2 sons. Their father didn't help at all. But the job also took up nearly all her time. And men usually kept their distance. 2 failed marriages. 2 children. At some point, she got tired of hoping. She decided to give up on a personal life and live only for her boys. And then she lost them too, which led to one disturbing question. If there was no man in her life, where did the 3rd child come from? Back in Kurchatov, the search for the killer continued. With every hour, the questions multiplied. Was the killer acting alone? Or was someone else involved? Near the crime scene, investigators found a very clear shoe print, captured in a photo taken right next to the bodies. Most likely, it belonged to the killer. What shocked everyone was the size of that footprint. It was tiny. A size 34. That meant only 2 possibilities. Either the killer was a child or a woman. The first theory was dismissed almost immediately. Whoever strangled 2 young boys couldn't have been a child. That kind of violence required serious strength. So only one option remained. A woman. And that raised a terrifying thought. Could the Soviet Union be dealing with a female maniac? Police now had their first solid lead. The killer's shoe size. They started with the victim's family and asked what size shoes the boy's mother wore. Elena wore a size 38. She even reacted with a bitter laugh, saying that if her feet were that small, she'd be miserable, because in Soviet stores, finding shoes in that size was almost impossible. Police combed through the entire town. In the end, they found only 3 adult women with feet that small. One was seriously ill. The second had a rock-solid alibi. And the third had just turned 93 years old. Once again, the case hit a dead end. During one of the meetings, one of the officers joked, "That footprint looks like it belongs to a Lilliputian." The room went completely silent. That's when the detectives remembered something. Not long before the murders, a regional circus had been performing in Kurchatov. And among the performers were several people of very short stature. Just like that, a new theory appeared. One they couldn't just brush off. An experienced investigator was brought in from Kursk and sent to watch the circus up close. But the circus led nowhere. Every performer had a solid alibi, and their presence at the crime scene was completely ruled out. Seeing the investigator's disappointment, the circus director suggested he stay and watch the show anyway. At the time, the detective had no idea that this simple suggestion was about to turn into an important lead. He sat there watching the Jiggets, Caucasian trick riders, when suddenly one name came to mind: Elena Pashayeva. About a year before the tragedy, Elena Pashayeva had arrived in Kurchatov. And from the very beginning, he caught Elena's attention. Tall, lively eyes, thick black hair, dark complexion. Elena's co-worker Ludmila later said, he was full of energy, good-looking, curly black hair, athletic build. Of course, everyone was drawn to him. After years of loneliness, Elena finally felt what she thought was happiness. Affection, gifts, sweet words. It all came at once and pulled her into a whirlpool of love. The result of that relationship was another pregnancy. To keep the children from getting in the way of her new life, Elena often sent them to stay with her ex-husband, Vladimir Tolstok. Sometimes the boys stayed with him for several days at a time. Detectives soon learned that at Vladimir's place, the children were often left unsupervised. They wandered around the streets on their own, and the older boy even stopped going to school. It was possible that somewhere during those days the killer had met them. The investigation into Elena's past continued. When Elena entered her new relationship, Vladimir Tolstok started drinking again. When he was drunk, he would say that he still loved her. To prove it, he bought gifts for the boys, markers for the older one, and for the younger, a pair of suspenders. When Elena talked about those gifts, she suddenly broke down in tears, because it turned out that on the day the boys disappeared, she had put those exact suspenders on her younger son, the ones Vladimir had bought. At that moment, detectives remembered a strange piece of fabric found at the crime scene. Now everything was starting to line up. The killer had used the suspenders as the strangulation tool. During one of the interrogations, Elena recalled that when Razum Pashayev found out the gifts came from her ex-husband, he became furious. He even told her to throw them away. According to Elena, Razum couldn't stand hearing her ex-husband's name, and he didn't like the children from her previous marriage either. Pashayev had more than enough reason to hate Elena's sons, a kind of hatred that could easily turn into murder. It didn't take long to realize just how explosive and out of control his temper really was. The detectives didn't want to put the grieving mother through even more pain, but they had no choice. The reasons to search the apartment were serious. The main suspect at that point was Elena's current partner, the man she had deliberately kept hidden from the police. They searched the apartment for hours. Nothing. Just old belongings, magazines, basic household items. They were almost done and about to leave when one of the officers noticed something on a small table. A regular school notebook. He opened it and froze. Page after page was filled with draft police complaints, all written in Elena's own handwriting. In those pages, she described how Razum had beaten her again and again. Beaten the children too. At night, she wrote complaints. By morning, she forgave him. All so she could protect the image of that well-dressed, charming Gidget everyone admired. But right there, in front of the investigators, the real man finally came into focus. Short-tempered, unstable, self-centered, and absolutely capable of murder. Still, on the day of the killings, Pashayev had been at work. His co-workers confirmed he never left the workshop, which meant Razum had no direct involvement in that crime. And once again, the main question came back. Who was the killer? And what was the motive? The children hadn't been sexually assaulted, so the motive clearly wasn't sexual. Everything pointed to something deeply personal. Then, a few days later, everything changed. Not far from Kurchatov, in a wooded strip near the city, people who had gone out to pick mushrooms found the body of a little girl. She had been strangled too. Her name was Sonia. She was 6 years old, the daughter of Svetlana Vidyanyeva, a ticket clerk. Sonia disappeared while playing outside. Her mother said she had turned away for just a minute, and the child was gone. A few hours later, Sonia's body was found. She hadn't been sexually assaulted either. There was a chilling similarity. Sonia's mother, just like Elena, was 9 months pregnant. That led investigators to a horrifying theory. The killer was deliberately targeting the children of pregnant women. But why? The next question was where the killer was meeting these victims. The answer was almost obvious. Places where pregnant women spend a lot of time. Women's clinics. Svetlana later remembered an incident at the clinic. A man had approached her in the hallway and tried to start a conversation. She turned him down, told him she was married and expecting her second child. But the man wouldn't let it go. At the time, she didn't think much of it, until her daughter was murdered. That's when, in terror, she remembered that persistent stranger. Finding and arresting the suspect wasn't difficult. That same night, he showed up at Svetlana's apartment himself. The police were already waiting. During questioning, he confessed, said he had lost his mind because of love. When Svetlana rejected him, something inside him snapped. In a fit of rage, he abducted her daughter and killed her. But one critical question remained. Was this man also the killer of the 2 little boys? The answer came quickly. No, he didn't even know about the brothers' murder. He admitted that to his cellmate, who, in reality, was an undercover officer. A psychiatric evaluation later confirmed that Sonia's killer was not mentally responsible for his actions. He was sent for compulsory treatment to a psychiatric hospital. And once again, in the case of the 2 murdered brothers, there were no answers. No leads. Nothing. The investigation was about to hit a complete dead end again, if one of the investigators hadn't noticed something strange. Exactly 4 months before the tragedy, Elena and Razum had officially made their relationship legal. Right before New Year's. Why the rush? How had they managed to hide this marriage from friends, relatives, and even the investigators themselves? Behind the closed doors of the civil registry office, a conversation took place between the registrar and Razum Pashayev, one that was never made public. But one thing was certain. That day, Razum and Elena became husband and wife. Elena never talked openly about the marriage, but one of her friends noticed a wedding ring on her finger. When she asked her directly, Elena admitted she had recently married Razum, and then broke down in tears. It didn't take long to uncover another truth. Razum already had a young lover. Elena's friend said he constantly complained about being tired of life, said routine was suffocating him. He even believed that a real Gigit shouldn't raise another man's children. More recently, he'd hinted that he might go back to that mistress, a woman who already had 2 children and even owned her own apartment. Doctors had told Elena the baby she was carrying was a girl. That news deeply upset Razum. He wanted an heir, a son. From that point on, the cheating started, and the arguments became more frequent. But Elena had no intention of backing down. She told her friends that her husband was hers, no matter what, and that she was going to keep him. At the same time, investigators were slowly arriving at a horrifying conclusion. That maybe Elena Pashayeva herself had played a direct role in the murder of her own sons. Because of her pregnancy and deteriorating condition, interrogations kept getting postponed. Until one night, a woman called the police, crying. She said, "My husband is gone." The officer on duty was about to hang up. Police don't usually get involved in relationship drama. But before the call ended, the woman gave her last name, Pashayeva. Then she added that she wanted to make a full confession. At the station, Elena said everything had started with love. A sick, obsessive love for Razum. She was so attached to him that she was willing to do anything to keep him. The appearance of a young, attractive mistress only pushed her deeper into despair. Elena's children became more and more irritating to Razum. Until one day, as he was leaving for work, he gave her an ultimatum. "When I come back, I don't want them here." He most likely meant sending the boys to their father's place. But Razum never imagined Elena would take his words this literally. In a moment of complete desperation, Elena made a decision she could never undo. She told the boys they were going out to pick snowdrops. She led them toward the forest belt under that excuse. The children believed her. She had prepared everything carefully. New boots for the older boy. For the younger one, a new expensive jacket and a new pair of suspenders. The boys were happy. On the way, their mother told them stories. They laughed. They felt safe. In the forest, Elena removed the suspenders from the younger boy and strangled both of her sons. At the beginning of the investigation, she had played the role of a grieving mother perfectly. That's why she stayed out of suspicion for so long. But the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. When the crime scene was fully reconstructed, only one question remained. Who had left that tiny footprint? Without saying a word, Elena took off her shoes and showed her socks, stuffed with cotton. Her feet really were very small, but finding shoes her size was difficult. On the day of the murders, she had worn one of those rare small pairs. Because of her pregnancy and unstable mental state, the interrogations were recorded to prevent her from later denying her statements. The next day, all of Kurchatov learned that Elena Pashayeva had confessed to the brutal murder of her 2 sons. Neighbors and co-workers were in shock. The crowd was furious. Under heavy guard, Elena was taken back to the crime scene. News of police operations always spread fast, and controlling the crowd was nearly impossible. As Elena showed where and how she had strangled the boys, 2 female witnesses fainted. Twice. Police quickly removed her from the area. They were genuinely afraid she wouldn't make it out alive. Her family tried to justify what she'd done. They said her love for Razum had completely destroyed her judgment. Her sister once said, "I'm sure no woman is immune to situations like this. Love changes people. When love takes over, no one can guarantee what a person is capable of." But during interrogations and even in court, Elena didn't shed a single tear. She spoke calmly, answered questions without hesitation. She cried only once, and that was in the hallway of the police station, when she saw Razum standing next to his new lover. Both of them called in as witnesses. The moment Razum saw her, he spat on the floor and turned away. In court, Elena said she only wanted to be happy. But in her mind, happiness wasn't her children. It was the man who beat her and cheated on her. She blamed everyone, teachers, parents, even her husbands. She said no one had ever taught her how to build a healthy relationship. She blamed her husbands for failing to provide her with a comfortable life, despite the fact that she earned a decent income herself. In her version of the story, everyone was guilty, except her, and there was no trace of remorse in her words. Her pregnancy spared her from the death penalty. The court sentenced her to 15 years in prison. While incarcerated, she gave birth to a daughter. After her release, she had another daughter with her fourth husband. Today, she still lives in Kurchatov and claims she remembers nothing about the crime. According to her, her fourth husband was also violent, and repeated blows to the head caused her to lose her memory. Elena's story is not a story about love. It's a bitter warning about how far desperation can push a person. The real victims of this case were two innocent children who lost their lives because of a deeply toxic relationship. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Until the next video, take care of yourselves and each other.